This is episode 616 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Recap.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Well, Wally, we are on the eve of summer. Things are heating up all over New Mexico, and sometimes good ways, sometimes bad ways. But boy, it was a busy week here at the Rio Grande Foundation, and especially yesterday. Had a wonderful event. Thanks for attending with Corey DeAngelis.
Yes, Corey did. He never fails to deliver the message, just telling his story about school choice, and then he is a very good speaker. Really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, so Albuquerque was the easy part. We wanted to get Corey and his message out of just the big city here. We went down to Alamogordo, and it's a long drive, especially when you have to make the way back. So Corey had a very, very long day yesterday, and I had a pretty darn long day as well, and had a great trip, though. Good meeting with folks down in Alamogordo. Among others, we had former Congresswoman Yvette Harrell in attendance, newly minted State Senator Jim Townsend, and Nick Paul, a new state senator from the Alamogordo area. So very nice to see some of those folks, and others, other dignitaries and whatnot, attended both events. We had a number of candidates and prominent officials relating to education in Albuquerque as well. You're right, Corey is amazing. He is definitely a strong advocate for giving parents and families the ability to choose the education that works for them, and funding, as he says, funding students, not bureaucracies. And if we just did that, New Mexico might not be dead last in education all the time.
Yeah, so Paul, there's a lot of controversy that, as Corey points out, and most people know the biggest opponents of school choice are the teachers' unions. But it's gotten to the point where, in a place like New Mexico, you cannot argue for keeping things the way they are, and again, I want to say New Mexico's not the worst when it comes to school choice. There are some choices out there, but we need more of it, not less, because our educational attainment here is not what it needs to be for our state to be successful and our students to go on and have successful lives and jobs and, do all the things that education can do for a person.
And the thing that I appreciate about Corey especially is that, when events on the ground shift and change, he adjusts to that reality. And for example, COVID is something that a lot of the institutional libertarian movement type folks did not want to touch on, especially during the pandemic. Corey was very active on social media and in the media during the pandemic, calling out the misguidance, the mistakes that people, including especially Lujan Grisham, made during COVID that wound up being devastating to our children, that led us, from 48th and 47th place all the way to 50 and 51st and 52nd place. Depending on how many states are included, only not actual outcomes. We're just 50th as a starting point, and then all the way to 52nd if we have enough states included. But
and to be clear, those are not states, but what is it? They do the District of Columbia, sometimes the federal school, sometimes they'll throw Puerto Rico or something in there. So just to be clear, we know how many states there are, but we go beyond that here in New Mexico.
That's true. There's not 57 like Obama said, but if we had 57, we might be dead last in education again in that study as well. So regardless, Corey is a strong advocate, and we were very happy to have him. We still have some signed copies of his book, so if anybody out there wants a signed copy of his book, send us a note, info@riograndefoundation.org. Like now, a little less in the way of positivity here, although, being dead last in education may not be the most positive thing in the world, but really fighting the good fight and working with folks like Corey does give you a sense of optimism that it can happen in New Mexico as well. We can improve things. It was frightening and concerning to drive eastbound on US, I believe, 380. It's the road from San Antonio to Carrizozo, the county seat of Lincoln County, and see the flame. Well, you didn't see flames. You just saw a huge plume of smoke coming from the general direction of Ruidoso, and that was very concerning to see. Ruidoso is a great town. It's a unique community within New Mexico. It's obviously got a lot of interesting history, and I was regaling Corey as we went. I said, this is where Smokey Bear came from, and hopefully there's Smokey Bear 2 and 3.0 are doing okay in the woods, as well as the people of Ruidoso and the Mescalero Apache tribe as well. But that's a huge fire. Ruidoso village is very much, just to be concerned with. It's been evacuated, and on the way back after our event, never saw the kind of traffic I saw last night on that US 380. There was a lot of vehicles, and let's just say I had to pass a lot of people who were going a little more slowly than I, trying to get back to Albuquerque. And our thoughts and prayers are with those folks and the firefighters fighting that fight, and hopefully they can get it under control and save as much of Ruidoso as is humanly possible.
Paul, my heart goes out to those people. Man, it is not fun to be in a forest fire area, and that one is a big one. And, they've had fires in Ruidoso before, but have not been many structures. And just looking at the map this morning, on that one side of town, it's not looking good. And so today's going to be the tough day again. It sounds like super low humidity and some breezes, and hopefully we'll get some cooler and higher humidity conditions to get that thing under control and get people in Ruidoso back in their homes and living life in the nice area that they have. But it's a tough one right now.
Yeah. Now, before I bring up the next subject, it is worth noting that we don't know what caused the fire at this point, to my knowledge. Obviously, this is the fire season in New Mexico. We've gotten used to fires generally happening in New Mexico in June because the heat comes, but we don't get good monsoon moisture pumped into our region typically until around the 4th of July holiday. So the point I'm making with that is that fires happen. Fires have always happened in New Mexico, and generally speaking, we are less the number of fires, as Bjorn Lomborg, he's called the rational environmentalist. He talks about the data and showing that in most ways the environment is not only growing cleaner, but it's growing safer, and that includes a lot of these indicators like forest fires, like hurricanes. But on the flip side, the good news is that oil and gas brought in $15.2 billion for New Mexico in fiscal year 2023. Now, some environmentalists say, oh, that's just causing all of this. Well, of course, the CO2 emissions that are growing are coming from Asia and China, and you don't hear a lot of commentary about that from the environmental groups. But $15.2 billion in one fiscal year from one industry, absolutely mind-blowing amount of money coming in from oil and gas. That's an even bigger number than the $13.9 billion that the oil and gas industry itself put out for fiscal year 2023. This number comes from the Legislative Finance Committee, of course, an arm of New Mexico's legislature, and it just highlights that we are in the good old days right here in New Mexico from a financial perspective. It's up to the political classes and the leadership and ultimately the voters of New Mexico to decide how we manage those resources, because those dollars could be used in some magnificent ways to improve outcomes. School choice, while fully funding the traditional education system, tax reductions, etc. There are so many opportunities out there, and this money is just a unprecedented windfall for almost any state.
Well, Paul, it harkens back to if you've been around a while, you know that oil has booms and busts when it comes to pricing for sure, and also production. And there's the old prayer of the old oil man is, Lord, grant me just one more boom. I promise not to fritter this one away. Only they don't say fritter away, but that's as accurate as I can get with the PG rating for this podcast. But here's the thing, that's New Mexico right now. We have unprecedented revenues to do things that they've always said, oh, we don't have the money to do this before. Now we have the money to do it, things that will help education, help crime, help diversify our economy. And it just seems like there's just kind of I don't know, it's the sound of crickets when it comes to what ideas can we do to really move things forward. So we'll see. We've got every year there's a legislative session. We even have a special session coming up here in a little while. See if anything moves forward that we think might have a real shot at moving the needle on some of the issues that are facing New Mexico. Because if not now, when, and if not when, it may be a never thing. And I just can't be that pessimistic to think that New Mexico can't eventually get their act together and implement some policies that are going to move the state forward and better than it's moving forward right now.
A couple of quick points. This is from the Albuquerque Journal's article on the issue. They note, the LFC does, that so-called peak oil production will come about in the 2030s. In my belief on that is that you might as well say we just have no darn clue, because
they've announced peak oil how many times, Paul? About every 5 years,
and this
right?
is slightly different.
Yeah.
Peak oil is like a global number that they say this is the amount, and generally they look at the demand side, the production side, kind of obviously in tandem. Whether peak production comes in New Mexico in the 2030s or not is a very open question. If you'd asked someone from the LFC in the 1990s whether New Mexico was going to, I don't know what 14 times means. There's not even,
right.
I kind of lose after octuple, I think, the octomom and octagons, you get a little shady after that. But we 14x'd our oil and gas production, or oil production, over the last 15 years or thereabouts. So we're in uncharted territory already. Now, all good things must come to an end. We may eventually hit so-called peak oil here in New Mexico in terms of production, but that is ample opportunity for this state to do whatever needs to be done. Now, ironically, the LFC, and this is where they do a great job in a lot of things, but one of the things that they state is, while all of that means, by that they mean the record-breaking production, they say it means record-breaking dollars coming to New Mexico, it also makes it difficult to grow more independent from the volatile oil and gas industry, as experts keep recommending. Now, I don't know whose quote or whose statement that is. If it's the Journal columnist, I would be willing to bet it's a combination of kind of analysts, legislators, and the journalist's own thoughts. Nothing could be more wrong-headed than that. I mean, yes, it is easy to be so-called fat and happy when you have this kind of revenue being generated by oil and gas, but to say that it makes it more difficult to diversify your economy, I mean, that is the classic, well, we're in a low price situation with low production in oil and gas. It's tough to diversify our economy when you're in that tough situation.
Yeah, and we don't have money. Now we have money. It's difficult because there's money. I don't get that, Paul. It's like you cannot have it both ways. And that the excuse machine of New Mexico not being able to move policy forward, it's gone full cycle now, and
Yeah.
it's failed on both sides. So
it is tough. You do need the political willpower to actually want to change. And I would say that figuring out how to diversify our economy is far, far easier than even somebody losing weight, for example, just throwing a thing that requires self-discipline, because honestly, this is a situation where you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
You're trying to lose weight. You do not have that ability. You have to cut out the cake and go on a limited diet. We can eat the cake. We can grow government. I mean, we could, if somebody gave me a number, say, we could average 6% growth in the size of the state general fund every single year for the next decade.
Right.
I could easily still get us to a zero income tax, gross receipts tax reform, and an economy that could actually long-term support that 6% growth in the absence of oil and gas. The problem is that we have political ignoramuses, unfortunately, who are elected by a population, at least the majority of whom seem to be political ignoramuses and economic ignoramuses, and or unwilling or undesiring of actual growth and improvements in our state. And that's the thing that really bugs me. So we shall see, but this is, definitely good news for our state. It's just a matter of doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, so it is good news, and the question is, do we act like so many unfortunate winners of the lottery that take the money and frit it away at ever increasing rates on things that don't create real value, and then end up as bad or worse off than they were before they won the lottery? Or do we as a state implement policies that are going to move us forward? And that's like the soap opera cliffhanger. Stay tuned. Days of Our Lives in New Mexico. What's going to happen? But the time is now to move some policies forward that are not just politically expedient and sound good to people, but actually move the needle. And there is a lot of evidence about what those policies are, because a lot of states have implemented policies along the lines of what we've talked about, and they've done way better in the recent times than they did before they implemented those. So,
well, the answer is pretty simple. Either you elect people who understand basic economics, or you elect people who are not interested in growth and improvement. And you don't have to show up for the legislative session if you have the answer to that question. So that's just the reality of the situation. Now, Wally, I know I send you our show notes before every time we convene here and talk. Were you aware that Artesia was having a big old party last weekend?
Not until you sent me the note. And it was quite an event that didn't really get very much coverage here in Albuquerque, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And what we were talking about is June 14th and 15th. So this past weekend, there was a very big event that happened in Artesia, New Mexico, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the discovery of oil and, of course, natural gas associated with it in Artesia and Eddy County. And they had some really prominent speakers. Keynoted Alex Epstein, which is a very good get. He is somebody who's really knowledgeable about these oil and gas issues, and then a bunch of other events highlighting the people and the technologies that made oil come out of the ground in such ample supplies throughout the last 100 years in New Mexico. Now, I wrote in a blog post that arguably this is the most important economic event in the modern history of New Mexico. The only competing event that even comes to mind is the Manhattan Project, which is obviously infinitely better publicized. I don't think they're going to make a movie about the discovery of oil and gas, although No Country for Old Men may be the closest. Not exactly a positive look, although it's not necessarily a critique of the oil and gas industry, just the characters thereof. But yeah, this is a big deal, a big effing deal, as Joe Biden would say. And nobody's talking about it. Even friendly conservative outlets, really, I don't think we're talking about these this success, this important issue, and the oil and gas that fuels not just our budget, but fuels our economy and America's energy independence. So happy 100th Artesia, happy 100th New Mexico, and most importantly, happy energy independence and financial windfall for the state. Obviously, we would like to see that windfall used in more productive and better ways, but absent oil and gas, you got to think that the population in New Mexico is probably around 500,000, limited to a number of scientists working out in the great desert expanse, and that's about it, because this state could not support more people unless, and this is the great counterfactual, unless the lack of oil and gas created a different voting pattern and different mentality about generating wealth that changed New Mexico's fundamental outlook. That's a possibility, but oil and gas makes this state go.
Yeah, no question about it. Yes, as there once was a time when New Mexico was had a larger population than Arizona, but that's in the way distant past now. And so, yeah, that is what would have happened without oil and gas. We'll never know. But now we just need to figure out how to make oil and gas something that works. Hey, oil and gas in and of itself is a great industry. It creates a product that we all use every day in our lives, whether, and that's including if you drive a Tesla, Paul, and have an all-electric home. It's more than just energy, although that's huge. It creates products, things we use every day in our lives. But yeah, it is interesting where we've come to. It's like it's the industry that we love to hate in New Mexico and we can't do without. And it is ironic that, 100 years from now, how will New Mexico have handled this period? If there is a slowdown in oil production in the state, will we just dry up and turn into something like North Dakota? Or will we have done something with our economy to move it forward?
That is an excellent question. More on that to come.
Although not in 100 years, at least for me. So
yeah. Speaking of failures of government, and our good friends, I use that term very advisedly, our good friends at Voices for Children who co-released this report. I wish I was in a position to, as an organization, publish our marquee report that reflects our values and interests, at least theoretically, and then run away from that report because it doesn't have the conclusions that I want it to have.
The political messaging that supports those that you support and who support you. And Paul, I cannot agree with you more on this because it's amazing. And, I read a few people had this comment. The most recent reports that are out on the status of children, what if that report would have come out during a Republican administration in Santa Fe? There would be screaming in Santa Fe about, it's the governor's fault. Now we have a governor who's a Democrat, both branches of the legislature, most of the Supreme Court justices, most of the bureaucrats are Democrats, and things are going poorly. So let's make some excuses.
Yeah, we're referring to the annual Kids Count report, which is produced by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Make no bones about it. This is a left of center national organization. The Kids Count report, as we've said in the past, is a solid report focusing on 16 different broad or specific variables. The only one that we truly disagree with, so we consider this a very solid report. The only one we disagree with is young children ages 3 and 4 not in school.
Because that does not correlate to academic success.
Yeah, absolutely. But the 4 big categories covered in in the report. Kids count, economic well-being, New Mexico's 48th. Education, we're 50th. Shock of shocks. Health, 44th. Family and community, 49th. Add it all together, and we wind up dead last yet again. But because this is the Michelle Lujan Grisham era with progressive Democrats in charge of both houses of the legislature, ample money available, they pretty much just don't want to deal with their own report because they have all the levers of power. They have everything that they could possibly want. And what is happening, and I'm talking about voices and kind of the left, they say, oh, well, this is old data. This is outdated. I mean, yeah,
We've made a little progress since this report came out.
Yeah.
And even they don't have the guts to say it's a lot because it's not a lot.
Yeah, and the variables are 7 improves, 7 decline, with a handful, obviously 2 others that stay the same. There's no pattern that you would even indicate success. This is getting to the midpoint. If you look at the data that they have, we're talking about 2022. So we're talking the midpoint of the MLG administration. I have a funny story. As a lot of organizations do press releases, because we have this show, I got a press release from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and I said, hey, I would love to have somebody on the show to discuss the findings of your report, because it's not just the left wing, it is also the media that will parrot the comments of the left, for example, the Albuquerque Journal, whatever, because they are simply reacting to the messaging being put out by the sponsoring organization here in New Mexico. So if they say, oh, this is huge, this is important because it shows that, for example, Susana Martinez is starving our kids of funds and resources and this, that, and the other, and everything's going to hell in a handbasket, that would be something that the media would glom onto and report dutifully. But because Voices downplays their own report, the whole thing is kind of treated in that particular manner. So it just puts us in this very unique position where quality information is being produced by an organization which we don't actually align with, but because it reflects the failures of the policies preferred by the presenting organization, they don't want to touch it. Now, I'll just go through all of the variables. Children in poverty, children whose parents lack secure employment, children living in households with a high housing cost burden, teens not in school and not working. All of those legit. Education, young children ages 3 and 4 not in school. That's one that we don't agree with. 4th graders not proficient in reading. 8th graders not proficient in math. High school students not graduating on time. That last one is iffy because while certainly graduating on time is better than not graduating on time, graduation standards have been so watered down and so become so meaningless in many ways, especially during the COVID era, which this report still contains data from. Of course, we were locked down for so long in New Mexico, and some COVID-related rules were adjusted for graduation. It's iffy. Anyway, low birth weight babies, children without health insurance, children and teens, teen deaths per 100,000, children and teens aged 10 to 17 who are overweight or obese. Nothing wrong with any of those. Family and community, children in single-parent families. That's the one I sit up and say, holy cow, Annie E. Casey Foundation, liberal groups, 2 parents, a dad in the household. What the heck are they doing?
Yeah, and that one is such a strong indicator that even they can't ignore that one.
Exactly. So. Children in families where the household head lacks a high school diploma, children living in high poverty areas, and teen births per 1,000. All of those very legitimate. So bad news for Kids Count, bad news for MLG and her policies and the legislature's policies. Of course, this is a report that, as you say, if Susana Martinez were somehow in the governor's seat or any future Republican, you would see this trumpeted from the rooftops by Voices for Children and their allies in the media. Sadly, the reality is that it's kind of just buried.
Yes, because of that, it's kind of like the progressive cops. Move along, nothing to see here.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of this, a survey by Education Week showed 94% of teachers of young children say their students have a challenging or much more challenging time listening and following instructions. This is due to the COVID lockdowns. This is a national report as well. 85% said their kids are struggling more with sharing and cooperating with their peers. Fine motor skills, 77% of educators found young students are having greater difficulties handling pencils, pens, and scissors. 69% saw their charges struggling to tie their shoes at higher rates than 5 years ago. This is from a report on Channel 13 KRQE. It's not just test scores. Kids are losing developmental skills. Of course, COVID lockdowns. We know that New Mexico not only had among the longest lockdowns, but because of our educational attainment or lack thereof and other systemic challenges that New Mexicans face, we probably struggle more than the average state with a lot of these things, which only translates into the story that we saw. And it's impossible to lay blame at any single thing, but the 11-year-old and the 13-year-old who were out on their crime spree here in Albuquerque, well publicized. And yes, I'm sure there are many family issues, many problems in the house, but was there some blame to be had in terms of COVID lockdowns and being out of school, et cetera, in terms of, because these socialization issues, unless there's interventions made, and we've not seen that because the governor doesn't want to admit that she did anything wrong. So heaven forbid we do something clear and difficult to actually address those outcomes. I mean, we've got summer school going on right now, summer reading programs, but only the kids whose parents either need free babysitting or want are actually academically inclined to begin with are going to engage with that. And it's very questionable how much of a positive impact that's all going to be. So anyway, again, laid at the feet of MLG and her bad policies.
Well, and Paul, maybe it's just because I heard Corey DeAngelis speak recently, but, a lot of these issues, they talk about some of these skills, there could be a program to educate parents too. It's like, hey, we went through COVID. There's some things that fell by the wayside, and it's important for you to help your children to get back up there. And here's what you might be able to do. But guess what? That plays into the narrative that the parents are responsible for the children's education, not the government, because the government's admitted they failed, but they don't like to really admit that. And because to do so would require them to maybe do some other things, again, like acknowledge it and talk to parents about how they might assist their children in getting back up to speed on some of these things. So,
exactly. We're going to have to skip the population story due to time constraints, but we are going to look at Virgin Galactic. Oh boy, poor Virgin Galactic. I don't have a great deal of sympathy for them, but as I've said, I disagreed vehemently with the construction of the spaceport at taxpayer expense and think the operations and maintenance could have been handled differently, but I was rooting for Virgin Galactic to do what they said they were going to do, and they've just been unable to make money while sending people into space. So they had their last mission a week ago Saturday. Now, due to their plummeting stock price, they embraced a 1-for-20 reverse split. For those of you who are not engaged in the stock market, if you had 20 shares of Virgin Galactic stock on Friday, you now have 1 share. And unfortunately, that 1 share is dropping quite significantly in value. There was a significant drop for Virgin Galactic. That's SPCE on the New York Stock Exchange. They were at 70 cents by the end of last week, after a 20-to-1 reverse split. So they theoretically take that 70 cents, multiply it by 20, and you're supposed to get their stock price. Well, the stock price as we sit here on Tuesday is now $9.78, but down 16.4% for the day. So the fact is that Virgin Galactic is in real trouble financially, and they've got a couple years admitted that they're going to be working on replacement craft to replace the Unity and other spacecraft there. I'm not going to say the end is near for Virgin Galactic, but boy, I don't see the light at the tunnel and how that's not just an oncoming train.
No, and they are in a tough situation. And Paul, you visited with Doug Messier about this over the years, and I remember, I believe it's one of the first interviews you had with him on the podcast. He talked about how at that time, many years ago, there were engineers that were leaving the project because they didn't feel like just the inherent design of what they were trying to do was going to get them to the number of flights they needed to do. It was just not going to work. And at least in Generation 1, that proved to be the case. The Generation 1 of their approach to suborbital space flight has proven to not work. And now the question is, do they have enough money, and can they raise enough money to get to something that will work? And that is a very open question, particularly from the point of view of the capital markets from a stock point of view.
And I'll only add that Maxeon, the governor's darling solar manufacturing company, they are getting mighty close to hitting that $1 stock threshold. They currently, as we sit here on Tuesday, $1.01, having been way down or way up at $50+ I think what this is saying to me is that that Maxeon construction project with taxpayer subsidies at Mesa del Sol that the governor was touting, I just don't know how they have the funds available to build a $1 billion manufacturing facility when they're going to be fighting for their lives. Then finally, had the chance to sit down with KOAT Channel 7 last Friday and talk about a report from the state auditor that kind of dinged or took issue with the New Mexico Environment Department of all entities. That flying economy, man, it's got its challenges, and going over to Australia, even though we're close to the West Coast, I'm sure that might not be as pleasant as flying in business class or first class. So Secretary James Kinney, of none other than the Environment Department, it's worth noting, recently had the opportunity to fly to Australia, could have done so for $2,000 in the economy class, the hoi polloi. Instead, he decided to do so for $15,000 of New Mexico taxpayer dollars. And of course, as I made sure, I basically threatened KOAT. Just kidding. But I said, you got to include the environmental stuff, because this is our dear leader, Michelle Lujan Grisham, the queen of the environment, and her environment department, taking up more space, flying in a more luxurious fashion, a very, very long way, when, of course, we could have done all this on Zoom, that they are pouring through CO2 emissions and using that for their own, I would love to go to Australia. I don't know about you, Wally, but sounds like a nice, fun trip. But they did so. They got dinged $15,000, 600% more than the initial cost of the flight, potentially. And yeah, that's our state government going.
Yeah, and Paul, being a person of more than modest stature, I feel the pain of flying anywhere. But yeah, that's a lot of money to spend. And most organizations, guess what, including the state of New Mexico, have policies and procedures to not allow these high-priced tickets whenever possible to get the best deal. And the excuse is made, and it is an excuse in a way. Well, I'd be better able to attend the meetings because I would have slept better or whatever. But you know, if
That's a load of hooey.
But
no, I know they did say that, but I want to explain.
Fly over a day early if that's the case. You know, I don't know.
That's possible as well. I can tell you though, I have flown business class. Now I flew business class north and south. I flew from the DC area to New York to Argentina on business class. Business class is lovely. You get free booze, you get all kinds of benefits. The chairs,
but it's
are
also
nicer.
not first class either, which is even small for this co-host of the podcast. I've been in first class, and by the way, I was upgraded. I did not ask, I did not pay, but you know, anyway. So.
Yeah, I had a relative that worked for the airline essentially. So the problem is that flying east to west, you cover so many time zones, and no matter how much you sleep, no matter how much you relax on the plane, you are not going to be ready to go because you're taking your time clock internal to your body and adjusting it massively along the east-west time scale. So your body is not prepared for that jolt to a different schedule.
Yeah, and no one's body handles that well. Some obviously do better than others. Paul, when I was doing some business with a European country, their stated objective is when people flew from America into Europe, they wanted to meet with them as soon as they got off the plane because they were at their most tired and most malleable when it came to doing deals, and that is a real thing. And so that issue is there. But did the $13,000 additional get you there? I don't know.
Yeah, and if your goal is to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for this big meeting, definitely staying a night in a Sydney hotel, an extra night would be A, more effective, and B, far cheaper. I mean, even $200 or $300 a night hotels. I'm sure Sydney's not a cheap place.
Even a Holiday Inn, you would be rested up.
Exactly. All right. Well, check out that KOAT story either at KOAT.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation or Heirs of Enchantment website. We will see you all later. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.